Karen screamed, "You're just a clerk!" at Judge Judy. What happened next exposed a killer secret that left the entire courtroom frozen in absolute shock. Karen Mitchell, a 42-year-old real estate mogul draped in a Chanel suit and dripping with diamonds, strutted into Judge Judy's courtroom like she owned the place. Her heels clicked against the polished floor with an arrogance that echoed through every corner of the room. She didn't just walk. She made an entrance, her chin lifted high, her perfectly manicured hand clutching a designer purse that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. The audience, packed shoulder to shoulder in the gallery, exchanged uneasy glances. They could feel it. The tension. The electricity. This wasn't going to be just another case. Karen's opponent, a nervous-looking contractor named Mike, stood at the plaintiff's podium, his hands trembling slightly as he shuffled through his papers. He was suing Karen for unpaid work, claiming she owed him $15,000 for renovations on one of her properties. Simple case, right? Wrong. Judge Judy sat behind her bench, her expression unreadable, her sharp eyes tracking Karen's every move like a hawk watching prey. She had that look, the one that said she already knew more than anyone in the room realized. Her fingers drummed lightly on a thick manila folder sitting in front of her, a folder that seemed unusually heavy for such a straightforward dispute. Karen barely glanced at Mike as she took her place at the defendant's podium. She sighed dramatically, checked her watch, and muttered just loud enough for the microphones to catch. "Can we make this quick? I have a lunch reservation at 3. The audience stirred. A few people shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Judge Judy's eyebrow arched ever so slightly, but she said nothing. Not yet. The bailiff called the court to order, and Judge Judy leaned forward, her voice cutting through the room like a blade. "Ms. Mitchell," she began, her tone calm but laced with something sharper underneath. "You're here because Mr. Torres claims you refused to pay him for work completed on your property. Is that correct?" Karen rolled her eyes, and waved a dismissive hand. "Your Honor, this man did subpar work. I'm not paying for garbage. He should be grateful I'm not suing him." Judge Judy's jaw tightened. The room went silent. Mike opened his mouth to respond, but Judge Judy raised a hand silencing him. She flipped open that thick folder, her eyes scanning the pages inside with deliberate precision. Then she looked up and her gaze locked onto Karen like a laser. "Ms. Mitchell," Judge Judy said, her voice dropping an octave. "Before we discuss this contractor dispute, I want to talk about something else. Something far more interesting." Karen's confident smirk faltered for just a split second. "Your previous business partner," Judge Judy continued, her words slow and measured. "The one who died 18 months ago. Let's talk about him." The courtroom exploded into whispers. Karen's face went white. "Before we dive into this incredible case, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I love seeing where my viewers are around the world. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss more unbelievable cases like this one. Now sit back, relax, and enjoy the video. Before I reveal what Judge Judy found, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications because what comes next will blow your mind. Now let's get back to the courtroom." Karen's hands gripped the podium, her knuckles turning white as Judge Judy's words hung in the air like a guillotine waiting to drop. The confident smirk that had defined her entrance was gone, replaced by a tightness around her mouth, a flicker of panic in her eyes that she couldn't quite hide. I don't see what that has to do with this case," Karen stammered, her voice losing its earlier edge. She tried to laugh it off, but it came out hollow, forced. "My former partner's death was a tragedy, but it was an accident. Everyone knows that." Judge Judy didn't blink. She leaned back in her chair, her fingers steepled in front of her, and let the silence stretch just long enough to make Karen squirm. The audience was riveted, their earlier whispers dying down to absolute silence. You could hear a pin drop. "An accident," Judge Judy repeated, her tone dripping with skepticism. "Yes, that's what the initial police report said. A terrible fall down the stairs at one of your properties. Very tragic." She paused, flipping through another page in her folder. "But here's what interests me, Ms. Mitchell. 3 weeks after his death, you collected a $2 million life insurance payout. And 6 months before that, you'd increased his policy from $500,000 to $2 million. Quite a coincidence, wouldn't you say?" The courtroom erupted. Gasps rippled through the audience like a shockwave. Mike, the contractor, stood frozen at his podium, his mouth hanging open. Even the bailiff's eyes widened. Karen's face flushed red, then drained of color entirely. That's completely irrelevant," she shouted, her composure shattering. "You can't bring that up here. This is about unpaid contractor work, not ancient history." Judge Judy's expression hardened into steel. She stood up slowly, her small frame somehow commanding the entire room. "Ancient history?" she said, her voice cutting through Karen's protests like a knife. "Ms. Mitchell, I've been doing this for 25 years. I know when someone is hiding something, and you, dear, are practically screaming it." Karen's lawyer, a young man in an ill-fitting suit who'd been silent until now, finally found his voice. "Your Honor, I must object. This line of questioning is highly prejudicial and has no bearing on. Sit down, Judge Judy snapped, not even looking at him. The lawyer sat. Karen tried to regain control, drawing herself up to her full height, her voice dripping with contempt. You know what? I don't have to listen to this. You're just a clerk with a gavel playing dress-up in a TV courtroom. You don't have real power. You can't intimidate me. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. The audience gasped again, louder this time. Someone whispered, "Oh no, she didn't." Judge Judy smiled. It wasn't a warm smile. It was the smile of a predator who'd just watched its prey make a fatal mistake. She sat back down, opened her folder wider, and pulled out a stack of documents. "Just a clerk?" she said softly, dangerously. "Let me show you what this clerk found." Judge Judy lifted the first document from her stack, holding it up so the courtroom camera could catch a glimpse of official letterhead and dense typed text. Karen's eyes followed the paper like a mouse watching a snake, her breath coming faster now, shallow and panicked. "This," Judge Judy began, her voice steady and surgical, "is a report from a private investigator I hired 3 weeks ago when your name crossed my desk. You see, Ms. Mitchell, unlike you, I do my homework." She set the paper down and picked up another. "Your former business partner, David Chen, died on November 14, 2023. Fell down a flight of stairs at a property you both owned. Tragic, as you said. But here's what's interesting." Judge Judy looked up, her eyes boring into Karen. "In the 6 months before his death, David told 3 separate people, his brother, his attorney, and his accountant, that he wanted out of the partnership. That he suspected you were committing insurance fraud, that he had evidence and was planning to go to the police." The courtroom exploded into chaos. People were half standing in their seats, craning their necks to see Karen's reaction. The bailiff had to raise his hand for silence, though even he looked shaken. Karen's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. Those are lies. He never said that. You can't prove." "I have sworn affidavits," Judge Judy interrupted, pulling out 3 more documents and slapping them onto her bench with deliberate force. "From all 3 witnesses?" "Dated and notarized." She wasn't done. "And then there's the matter of your properties, Ms. Mitchell. Over the past 7 years, you've owned 12 different commercial properties. 5 of them suffered major damage. 2 fires, 1 flood, 1 mysterious electrical failure, and 1 structural collapse." Judge Judy paused, letting each word land like a hammer blow. "And in every single case, you collected insurance payouts totaling over $3 million. Every single time." Karen's hands were shaking now, visible tremors she couldn't control. Sweat beaded on her forehead despite the courtroom's air conditioning. Her lawyer sat frozen, his pen hovering uselessly over his legal pad. Mike, the contractor, had completely forgotten about his own case, staring at Karen with a mixture of horror and disbelief. "That's standard business practice," Karen shrieked, her voice cracking. "Properties get damaged. That's why insurance exists. You're twisting everything to make me look like some kind of criminal." Judge Judy leaned forward, her voice dropping to just above a whisper, forcing everyone in the courtroom to strain to hear her. "David Chen didn't just fall down those stairs, did he, Ms. Mitchell?" The question hung in the air like a noose. Karen's face went from pale to gray. Her lips trembled. For a moment, it looked like she might faint. Then something in her snapped. "You can't talk to me like this," she screamed. "I'm leaving. This is harassment. This is slander." She grabbed her purse and turned toward the courtroom exit. The bailiff stepped forward, blocking her path. Judge Judy hadn't moved. "Sit down, Ms. Mitchell. We're just getting started." Karen stood frozen between the bailiff and the exit, her chest heaving. Her designer purse clutched against her body like a shield. The courtroom had descended into complete chaos. Audience members were openly talking now, their voices rising in a cacophony of shock and speculation. The camera operators zoomed in tight on Karen's face, capturing every bead of sweat, every twitch of panic crossing her features. "I said sit down," Judge Judy repeated, her voice cutting through the noise like a crack of thunder. There was no warmth left in her tone now, only iron authority. Karen's lawyer tugged weakly at her sleeve, whispering something urgent, but she shook him off. For a long moment, she just stood there, trembling with rage or fear or both, before finally, slowly walking back to the defendant's podium. Her heels didn't click with confidence anymore. They dragged. Judge Judy waited until Karen was seated before continuing, and when she spoke again, her voice carried a finality that made the entire room hold its breath. "Here's what really happened, Ms. Mitchell. And before you interrupt me, know that I have evidence for every word I'm about to say." She pulled out a thin stack of papers clipped together, photos on top. "On the day David Chen died, you called him at 2:47 p.m. Phone records confirm this. You told him you needed to meet at the Riverside property, the one you're now claiming this contractor." She gestured to Mike. "Did shoddy work on. David arrived at 4:15 p.m. Security footage from a neighboring business shows his car pulling into the lot. Karen's breathing had become audible now, ragged gasps that the microphone picked up and amplified throughout the courtroom. Her lawyer had stopped writing entirely, his face ashen. At 5:03 p.m., Judge Judy continued, her words measured and deliberate. You called 911 hysterical, claiming you'd just arrived and found David at the bottom of the basement stairs. You said you'd been shopping, that you had no idea what happened. Judge Judy held up a receipt, except you weren't shopping. This receipt you provided to police? It's from a store 45 minutes away and it's time-stamped 3:22 p.m. Impossible if you found David at 5:03. The courtroom gasped collectively. Someone in the back shouted, "Oh my God!" Karen shot to her feet, her face contorted with fury and terror. You're insane. You're making this up. Where's your proof? Where's your actual evidence? Judge Judy's expression didn't change. She simply held up another document, this one with an official seal visible even from a distance. I contacted the district attorney's office 2 weeks ago. They reopened David Chen's case based on the evidence I provided. And yesterday, she paused for effect, her eyes locked on Karen's. They obtained a warrant for your arrest. The words landed like a bomb. The courtroom erupted into absolute pandemonium. Karen's lawyer dropped his pen. Mike stumbled backward. The audience was on its feet, some people shouting, others with hands over their mouths in shock. And Karen? Karen's legs gave out. She collapsed back into her chair, her face a mask of pure horror. You won't believe what Judge Judy does next, but first, smash that like button if you're loving this justice being served, and comment below what you think should happen to Karen. Now, let's see how this ends. The bailiff moved closer to Karen's side of the courtroom, his hand resting casually but deliberately near his belt. The gesture wasn't lost on anyone. Karen sat slumped in her chair, her $1,000,000 outfit suddenly looking like a costume, her carefully applied makeup streaking as sweat mixed with tears she was desperately trying to hold back. Judge Judy let the chaos continue for exactly 10 seconds before she slammed her gavel down 3 times, sharp cracks that cut through the noise like gunshots. Order! I will have order in my courtroom! The audience settled, but the energy remained electric, volatile, ready to explode again at any moment. Judge Judy straightened her papers with methodical precision, her movements calm and controlled, a stark contrast to the pandemonium she'd just unleashed. When she finally looked up at Karen, her expression was carved from stone. Ms. Mitchell, she began, her voice quieter now but somehow more terrifying because of it. I'm going to explain something to you. When you walked into my courtroom today, you thought you were above consequences. You thought your money, your clothes, your arrogance would protect you. You called me just a clerk. Well, this clerk spent 3 weeks building a case that your own defense attorney, she glanced at the young lawyer who looked like he wanted to disappear, never saw coming. Karen tried to speak, her mouth forming words, but nothing came out except a choked sob. Judge Judy wasn't finished. The district attorney has been investigating you for 2 weeks. They have forensic evidence that the stairs David Chen fell down were tampered with. The railing had been deliberately loosened. Your fingerprints, Ms. Mitchell, are on the screws that should have held it in place. The courtroom gasped again, louder this time. A woman in the 3rd row actually screamed. Karen's head snapped up, her eyes wild, mascara now fully running down her cheeks in black rivers. No, she shrieked, her voice breaking. That's impossible. I never touched those stairs. This is a setup. You set me up. Judge Judy remained unmoved. The forensics don't lie. Neither does the email you sent to your insurance company 3 days after David's death, inquiring about the payout timeline. Or the text message you sent to a friend saying, and I quote, problem solved. I can finally breathe again. She held up a printed screenshot of the text message, large enough for the cameras to capture. Karen lunged forward, reaching for the document as if destroying it would make the evidence disappear. The bailiff was faster, stepping between her and Judge Judy's bench, his hand now firmly on her shoulder, pushing her back down into her seat. Don't, he said simply, and Karen crumpled like a marionette with cut strings. Judge Judy stood, her small frame somehow filling the entire courtroom with authority. In the matter of Torres versus Mitchell, I find in favor of the plaintiff. Ms. Mitchell, you will pay Mr. Torres the full $15,000 plus interest and court costs. But that, she paused, her eyes boring into Karen, is the least of your problems. She nodded toward the back of the courtroom. The double doors opened, and 2 detectives in plain clothes walked in, their badges visible on their belts. The room went silent. You could hear Karen's ragged breathing, hear the shuffle of the detectives' shoes on the courtroom floor, hear the collective held breath of 50 people watching justice unfold in real time. Ms. Mitchell, Judge Judy said, her voice final and absolute, I'm not a prosecutor. I'm not the police. but I am someone who recognizes a murderer when I see one, and I don't let them walk out of my courtroom unpunished. The detectives reached Karen's side. One of them pulled out handcuffs while the other began reading her Miranda rights.
Karen Mitchell, you have the right to remain silent.
Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. Karen's scream cut through the words, a primal sound of rage and desperation. You bitch! You destroyed me! You ruined my life. Judge Judy's response was ice cold. No, dear. You destroyed your own life when you killed David Chen. I just made sure you'd face the consequences. That's what this clerk does. The handcuffs clicked, shut around Karen's wrists with a sound that echoed through the silent courtroom like a judge's final gavel. The detectives escorted Karen toward the courtroom exit, her wrists bound in steel, her designer heels scraping against the floor as she tried to resist. She twisted back toward Judge Judy one last time, her face contorted with hatred and desperation, mascara-stained tears streaming down her cheeks. This isn't over! She screamed, her voice cracking. I'll sue you. I'll destroy you. You can't do this to me. Judge Judy didn't even look up. She was already reviewing the next case file on her desk, her expression neutral, unbothered, as if Karen had already ceased to exist in her world. The message was clear. Karen Mitchell was no longer worth her attention. As the courtroom doors closed behind Karen and the detectives, the audience erupted. Not in applause at first, but in shocked conversation, people turning to their neighbors with wide eyes and open mouths, processing what they'd just witnessed. Then slowly the clapping started. One person, then two, then a wave of applause that built into a standing ovation. They weren't applauding Judge Judy for entertainment. They were applauding justice. Mike Torres, the contractor who'd started this whole thing with a simple $15,000 claim, stood at his podium in complete disbelief. His hands trembled as he gathered his papers, his mind clearly reeling. He'd come here expecting to argue about unpaid invoices and shoddy work disputes. Instead, he'd watched a murder case unfold in real time. As he walked past Judge Judy's bench, he stopped and whispered, "Thank you, Your Honor." Judge Judy gave him a small nod, the closest thing to warmth she'd shown all day, and replied quietly, "Get your money, Mr. Torres. And next time, trust your instincts about people." Within 2 hours, clips from the episode exploded across every social media platform. Twitter lit up with hashtags Judge Judy exposes killer, Karen arrested, and Cleark with a purpose trending worldwide. TikTok videos dissecting every moment of Karen's breakdown went viral, accumulating millions of views. News outlets scrambled to cover the story, with CNN, Fox News, and MSNBC all running segments by evening. Headlines screamed, "Reality TV turns real. Judge Judy catches alleged murderer. Karen's courtroom meltdown leads to murder arrest. And TV judge succeeds where police failed." Legal analysts weighed in, praising Judge Judy's thoroughness while debating the ethical implications of exposing a suspect on television. Defense attorneys called it a publicity stunt. Prosecutors called it brilliant detective work. Victim advocates called it justice finally being served. The district attorney held a press conference that same evening, confirming that Karen Mitchell was being held without bail, facing charges of first-degree murder and insurance fraud. When asked about Judge Judy's involvement, the DA smiled and said, "Sometimes justice comes from unexpected places. We're grateful for citizens who care enough to dig deeper." David Chen's family released a statement through their attorney. "For 18 months, we've lived with questions and pain. Today we finally have answers. We're eternally grateful to Judge Judy for giving David a voice when everyone else had moved on." The case that started as a contractor dispute had become a cultural phenomenon, a moment where entertainment television delivered real-world consequences. 3 months later, Karen Mitchell stood trial for the murder of David Chen. The evidence Judge Judy had uncovered became the backbone of the prosecution's case. The tampered staircase railing, the suspicious insurance claims, the timeline that proved Karen had lied about her whereabouts, and that devastating text message. Problem solved. I can finally breathe again. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours before returning a guilty verdict. Karen Mitchell was sentenced to life in prison, without the possibility of parole. The woman who had walked into Judge Judy's courtroom dripping in diamonds and arrogance would spend the rest of her days in a 6-by-8-foot cell. Judge Judy never commented publicly on the trial's outcome, but those who knew her said she watched the verdict with quiet satisfaction, not because she enjoyed seeing someone destroyed, but because justice had finally been served for a man whose death had almost been forgotten. This case became more than just a viral moment. It became a lesson in the dangers of unchecked arrogance, of believing that wealth and status place you above accountability. Karen Mitchell's fatal flaw wasn't just that she committed murder. It was that she underestimated everyone around her. She underestimated David Chen's courage to stand up to her fraud. She underestimated the people who remembered his warnings. She underestimated a contractor brave enough to sue her. And most critically, she underestimated the woman sitting behind that bench, dismissing her as just a clerk with a gavel. Judge Judy proved what many forget in a world obsessed with titles and appearances. Real power doesn't come from designer clothes or bank accounts. It comes from preparation, integrity, and the relentless pursuit of truth. Karen thought she could swagger into that courtroom and intimidate her way out of consequences. Instead, she walked out in handcuffs because she made the mistake of judging someone by their job title, rather than their character. The episode has been watched over 80 million times across various platforms. It's taught in law schools as an example of thorough case preparation. It's shared in business seminars as a warning about ethical conduct. And it's replayed in living rooms around the world as a reminder that justice, real justice, doesn't care about your status. In one explosive hour of television, Judge Judy didn't just preside over a case. She solved a murder, honored a victim, and reminded us all that respect isn't given based on wealth or position. It's earned through action, through doing what's right even when it's difficult, through being someone who stands for truth no matter who's watching. What did you think of this unbelievable takedown? Drop your reaction in the comments. And if you want to see more moments where karma hits hard, click that video on your screen right now. It's about a lawyer who thought he was untouchable until one piece of evidence destroyed him in seconds. Hit subscribe so you never miss these incredible stories. Remember, never underestimate anyone because you never know who's really watching.